Good morning, everyone. We're sharing our screen and we will go through a series of slides today. A portion of this meeting will be interactive. And again, I want to remind everyone this is being recorded. And the hope is that it will be posted later on the Tifton County website. Next slide.
So first, thank you all again for joining us, and thank you for engaging with us in this process and allowing us to come up there and help collaborate with you guys to create, this vision for Tifton County.
So that was Jonathan Flint. He is working with me. I'm Scott Henninger. We are kind of running this. We have Wayne Liu with us who helped put this presentation together and the interactive portion today. And then Frank Riggs is also on the call. First, we'll get into a brief recap of the kickoff meeting held last month. We'll get into the base map progress. We will review and approve the goals and guiding principles. And one thing that is new is a vision statement, so we can have discussion if there's some issues in the poll that indicate that we need to work on these a little bit more. We also will review the upcoming schedule and an overview of the draft public engagement process, and then we'll wrap up at the end with some questions. Next slide. So this is the recap of the first meeting, which was the kickoff meeting back in January 18th of last month. And Jonathan started out with a summary of the April 5th, 2022 meeting. This was really before we got started in this process. So at that meeting, we summarized a lot of those findings and began this draft of the preliminary goal statement and draft guiding principles, what you saw at your last meeting. We also looked at the draft schedule, and we talked about what may occur in the future phases, which includes public engagement, possible outcomes, development of different land scenarios, and land use recommendations, including a report that may come out of this. We also talked about the existing base map. And the reason why we are doing this, just to go back to the last meeting, you see at the bottom of your screen, Blue Oval City has provided quite a bit of development pressure for the community. And also the land use plan has not been updated over 20 years.
So it's multiple reasons to be taking a look at this, and then and compounding that, Scott's absolutely right. The one thing that we've heard from you guys on the ground and within the community is that you may not have because in part because of the age of the future land use plan, and then just as things have evolved over the last 20 years, right, is that maybe some of your goals and some of your vision, while those may be the same, or in some cases have, may need to be tweaked, maybe the way things are occurring on the ground, we see room for doing things in different ways to better achieve those goals and those visions.
Next slide. So at the last meeting, we looked at only the existing condition map, and there was a discussion about I-69 that is not an existing condition. So we have moved that to a different map that is now on our transportation plan. And just to let you know, we will make these available after the meeting with a PDF that will be sent out. We have these 8 maps. There are actually a few more specific utility district information that cannot be released to the public at this time that we also have been working on. And we are also gathering information on soils and aquifers in hopes to have some additional maps beyond what you see on your screen. Next slide. This is the existing conditions map. This is what you saw at your last meeting minus the I-69 corridor. If there are major communities that for some reason we have left off, please email me later on. I'll give you my information. Again, the major roads are on here, and we can talk about any changes that may need to occur. We are going to keep massaging the legibility of these. We may have to blow up some of these communities to make it more readable.
Blow up the size of the text.
That's right.
Just to make sure we're clear on that, guys. Sorry. I think they all understood. Yeah.
And what you see on your screen now is the existing land use. Just to let you know, this is information based upon the assessor's classifications. The state actually manages this information, so that is what we have. There may be some inaccuracies here, but we are looking for you to identify those and help clean those up.
Hey, Scott, maybe I'll ask the question here that some people might be thinking or will think later on. So like you said, this is based on the assessor's evaluation of that property. Does this align with their current future land use map in those categories?
It does not align. It's-
Okay, so there we
There
go.
are some similarities, but it does not align.
Yeah.
Excellent. This one indicates natural environment. What we're talking about here are some of the public lands, water bodies, and floodplains that you see. There is quite a bit of floodplain in your county.
And one of the things that we have picked up on here, guys, that you'll notice is we've started pulling in information regarding the individual watersheds. Those primary watersheds, you can break, you can break those down to the nth degree, down all the way down to a ditch in your, along the curb. But these indicate the major watersheds because we believe that that could actually become an important foundation, depending on the feedback we receive about how we go about looking at planning and land use across the county. Because as you guys know, stormwater, gravity fed infrastructure, things like that, a lot of those do ride along those watershed lines, those ridge lines, and those the watershed direction of flow have a big impact on a lot of that stuff.
Thank you, John. This map indicates different facilities, and you can see the key in the top left of your screen. What we're talking about are different fire districts. That's the boundary shown. We may need to work on that legibility a little bit. We have the fire station locations, the hospital, and different police stations, and that includes the sheriff's office. And one thing that we found that was interesting, if you look across the river in one of your islands, there is a substation for the sheriff's office there. We understand that may not be active, but there is one located over there.
So I'll say this, Scott brought that to my attention, or when we were looking at a map, I said, what is that? It says, there's no way there's a police station over there. And then we went through and we verified that, oh, yes, but there was a substation over there, or there may still be a facility there as well. But yeah, it wasn't active, but we'd like to hear more back from you guys on the status of that. But that's an example of places where your feedback and, just things that you might think are common knowledge may not be quite as common knowledge as you think. And so you sharing that information with us is absolutely critical at this point.
Excellent. This map shows different school districts, including your middle, elementary, and high schools. There's also a college, a learning center, and private schools shown on this particular map. If we are leaving something off, please let us know where that information or where that's located. We'll be glad to add that on the map. Next slide. This is the existing zoning map. Keep in mind, this map may change once this land use plan is adopted. There may be some countywide, that's what you choose, countywide initiated rezonings that more aligns this particular map with your future land use plan.
Those are all future steps. We don't have to worry about that right this second. Right, Scott?
That's right. Next slide. This is your transportation map. It does show your arterials, your collectors, and your miners, along with the I-69 corridor dash through the site there that parallels Highway 51.
The proposed I-69. As we all know, nothing has been built yet, and until it's built, it's not locked in stone.
Yes. Excellent. Finally, this is the utility district map. And what this is showing are your water and sewer districts. And where you see the very bottom one, that is that light blue Southwest Tennessee Electric, there is no water or sewer coverage in those areas currently, but that is something that may occur later on by one of your existing utility districts. And just to mention one more thing, the electric is covered outside of Covington by that Southwest Tennessee Electric, within Covington by Covington Electric, and from what we understand, across the river is covered by Arkansas.
So, and just as a note here, or probably because this was a point of consternation for us, everything that Southwest Tennessee Electric, for example, and not to beat up on Gresham Smith, but we were looking at their report, and that represents a big chunk of the county, and there was absolutely no information there. And so we started doing some digging, and thanks to the digging there of noting that that just was left out of the report as if nothing existed. So again, thank you guys for helping us to verify the coverage for those portions of the county that were not covered in that report, and that there's still room to build on this information.
Thanks, Justin. Next slide. So now we're going to start the interactive session. And we're going to get into our goal statement, our guiding principles, and vision statement. And we will open up a poll for you to vote. This is close enough for adoption, yes or no. And particularly when we get to the guiding principles, if there's maybe one guiding principle that is a hang up, I'd like to see that in the chat box and we can talk about that and work that out. And see if we can have consensus on that. So I will go through these individually, starting with the draft goal statement. And what we're talking about here is for the process. The new vision statement that we have at the end will be the result, what we want the outcome to be, but this is for the process. So to craft a shared vision for the future of Tipton County, utilizing a balanced approach to growth, supported by infrastructure and services that protects, reinforces, and enhances the values, quality of life, and character of the community and its citizens. Now, we're going to give you about 30 seconds to put in your vote here and let us know if you are agreeable to that as adoption. We're launching it right now.
Here it comes. Live voting.
Attendees that we have.
We are 32, so we'll wait.
Minus 2 and those.
Has everyone voted?
No, we have 20, getting close.
28 in total. Six more.
Should have been Frank and us.
Yeah.
Yes.
Nobody else.
Yeah.
Anyone else like to vote?
Yeah, there we go. I'm not saying that we're not going to move on after 30 seconds, but we can also see how many people have voted. So I'd encourage you to push the button. I think we're one more, right?
No, 4 more. Yeah.
Four. We may have 4 holdouts.
Anyone else?
Is there a chat box? Because we need to check. It doesn't look like we've received any notes in chat yet.
Yeah.
So, okay, so I'll do a countdown, 3. Everybody's good with that 3 and 2 and 1. All right, we're going to close it out. Not to diminish the no vote if and not to call that person out either, because we don't have to. So if you would send us your comments, if you did vote no, we'd like to at least be able to understand those. You don't have to do it here if you'd rather not. And that way we can at least have that documented going forward. And that will also inform us and help us as we move forward in the process.
All right, thank you for your votes.
So thank you. Yeah.
Come back.
And we can come back and discuss this.
Yeah.
So moving on to the draft guiding principles, and these are what we are looking for objectives. And I'll start with the first one, and I'll read through each of these. And if you have a particular concern about one of these, please place that in the chat box and we can talk about that. The first one is develop growth strategies built upon the foundation of fiscal responsibility and community trust. Number 2, ensure that development and investment respect, build upon and enhance the unique character of Tipton County, including its diverse communities, sensitive environmental features, scenic resources, and farmland. Number 3, proactively plan for a balance of growth supported by infrastructure and services that improves and enhances the quality of life of citizens by expanding opportunities for transportation, mobility, jobs, business development, housing, education, recreation, and other community needs. Number 4, provide guidance, regulations, and incentives to promote high-quality development with well-designed buildings, site improvements, streetscapes, landscaping, and open space. So that's talking about aesthetics. And number 5, establish the foundation for continuing planning excellence in the years to come, including a process for informing and engaging the community. So that is talking more about an ongoing process. We're going to open up the voting again. If you believe that this is ready to go, please vote yes. If no, vote no, and then place something in the chat box why.
And as Scott, as we wait for more votes to roll in, guys, and we appreciate your thought on these. And that's not just today, but that's leading into this. I will say that I've been engaged in countless processes where when we have asked people to comment on these and provide feedback and edits, where it's an echo chamber, or or worse, there's no response. And so we're totally in the dark. So I really appreciate everybody's active engagement on this so far. So I'll be quiet while you continue to consider for a few more minutes, for a few more seconds here.
One thing I want to mention, going back to our original meeting, we had 3 of these. So we've taken your comments that we've received since the last meeting, incorporated those into these principles and tried to separate them by category the best we could.
I think we're missing a few more here. If we could get, it looks like we've got a few holdouts, and we're going to check the chat to make sure that yet.
One chat.
Yeah. Maybe say in the future. Okay, yeah, you know, that's we had a comment, guys, that's that maybe saying number 5 of planning excellence, instead of in the years to come, we can say, you know, in the future. Yeah.
Thank you.
And and I think everybody understands the point of that is that we did receive that was a comment that we received back from several people of noting that planning, as we've talked about, isn't stale. It's not just something we set on the shelf, and that it also involves continued public engagement with the citizens of Tipton County throughout, basically all the time. So we really appreciate that feedback, and so please. It looks like we're looking for a few more votes.
Anyone else want to vote?
In this case, guys, not voting is not abstaining. It's support. And so I'm going to give it a 5, kind of 5, right? So maybe a 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. All right.
Thank you.
And if there's a reason that you don't, if you'd also send us a note if you're not feeling like you want to vote on some of these, like I said, we're not noting who's voting and who's not. Just send us a note if there's something that's uncomfortable about this process, because that's how we're doing it today. If there's something about this you don't like, we can change our approach as we go forward.
All right. And now the third, the vision statement. Now this would be the outcome, not the process. To ensure Tipton County protects, reinforces, and enhances the values, quality of life, and character of the community and its citizens in planning for growth that is supported by infrastructure and services. We're going to open up the poll again. And we did hear a lot of emphasis with our comments about the citizens and having them involved in this process.
Back up to 21, all right, 22. All right, if we can get a couple more, it looks like we got a couple of holdouts.
Very close.
Okay, yeah. 3 more.
I think the number up here that is out from the participant is somebody joining with their phone.
Oh, phone, it was great.
Not like vote.
Thank you, wait, that's
For the
correct.
people they can vote there, 28.
So we've had it up for a little over a minute now. I'll give it another count of starting at 5 and 4, 3, 2, and 1. All right, thank you, guys.
Yeah.
This was, thank you for the resounding approval. And the notes specifically earlier on with the goal and for those who sent comments and the principles.
That was pretty good consensus. We're
Yeah.
Very excited about that. We did have one no vote on the process statement.
And that's okay. I think that's it. And I'd like to go ahead and share that, Scott, man.
Sure.
The one no was related to specifically to diversity and being sure to incorporate that, in the way I read it too, is that it's everybody together is a resident and citizen of Tipton County, but we may have different and varying viewpoints, and that's great. That's what makes it a well-rounded, balanced, and sustainable community, a resilient community. And so I am not opposed to considering that. We can talk about that, but yeah, I appreciate everybody's feedback on this.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it sounds like we've got approval. I would take that as a,
That we have approval.
yeah, approval.
Right.
So thank you, guys.
Next slide. Okay. At our last meeting, we did talk a little bit about this schedule. What you see at the top in the black section, that is our current phases. Phases 1 and 2 are kickoff and analysis and base mapping. So you see where we are today with that second orange dot there. We also have some meetings coming up in March, possibly early and late March. The next meeting, and this is a change from the last one, would occur on March the 7th. It was moved to a Tuesday. It would also be a Zoom meeting because the expo is on that Wednesday. We also had to adjust the 4th meeting, which would have occurred during spring break, and we pushed that back a week. Now, we'll get into that at the next meeting, the specifics of that. But right now, we anticipate your next meeting occurring on March 7th, same time, 11 a.m. via Zoom. Next slide.
Well, now might be a good time, Scott, before we move on to kind of like the next topics. So we've covered a lot. Thank you for the participation in the voting and helping us get the principles, goals, and vision together again. We couldn't have done it without y'all, and that's by design, of course. And thank you for the base mapping. As Scott mentioned, there's more information we're still collecting. Does anybody have any questions for us based on what we've covered so far? We're getting great notes in the chat too. And so thank you for that feedback. Please continue that. We're documenting that as we receive it. But are there any questions or anything that we need to cover before moving on?
I think we'll go ahead and move on. One thing I want to note on this schedule that you see is phase 3 is the public engagement. So the next series of slides will get into what that might look like. Next slide. So in planning for these stakeholder meetings, what we're anticipating right now, this may change, is stakeholder meetings that occur at 3 different locations on 3 separate days and probably separate weeks. We'll space them out geographically across the county.
And why is that, Scott?
We're doing that to make sure we engage as many people as possible. And we are going to have specific geographic questions and groups from that. And we're trying to keep these groups small enough, 10 to 15 people or so, to allow them to feel like they're engaging and not necessarily afraid to speak up. We also have an opportunity at these stakeholder meetings where they may have a separate station that they could put in their public comments if they're afraid to speak up at the time. So one thing to mention, we're anticipating about 4 of these groups during each of these 3 sessions. Each of these will be 1 hour long, spaced about an hour and a half apart. That way we allow for a little bit of overflow with time and some of the people ushering in and out. We may also have some public that may show up. So we're going to need some of your help on that as well, maybe with some volunteers, and we'll talk about that here shortly. Now, what we're anticipating right now, we heard some of this at your kickoff meeting, are these groups, these stakeholder groups. And again, these would be based geographically based on each of the three meetings. So first, we would talk about youth, education, and recreation, and that is all kind of interconnected. Getting their thoughts. The municipal side of things, we'd like to have as much municipal participation as possible, but not a whole lot of elected officials because we have to watch out for sunshine laws as well. The third group would be general welfare. That came up in our kickoff meeting, that there was no one in the steering committee from general welfare and culture, that is something that we need to talk about as well as programming for events and so on with our land use. And the final one is geographic interests such as large property owners, maybe farmers or large employers in that area as well. And to wrap up the third stakeholder meeting, we would have an open house that evening. Now, one thing I can mention, we'll go to the next slide, is where these events may happen.
Can we wait just a second before we go on stuff?
Sure.
So that's what we had heard as far as our proposed stakeholder groups. And to emphasize Scott's point, the municipal recognizing that, while technically our study boundary doesn't incorporate, for example, the municipality of Atoka going into within their city limits, Atoka is a part of Tipton County, as well as all the other municipalities. And so we believe it's important to have a voice kind of representing the city, the municipalities and their interests as part of a stakeholder group in order to get full buy-in for the entirety of the county. We really think there needs to be solid buy-in from everybody. And so now we don't see that as impacting necessarily diving into studies within those municipalities specifically, but it's making sure that we incorporate their interests and their impact on the county as well. And so this is a proposed selection of stakeholder groups.
Yes.
And so we are open to, is there issues, is there a topic area that we are missing? We'd like to hear about that right now.
Absolutely. We're going to lean on you to help figure out who those stakeholders are as well.
Right, that's another big part, is figuring out who those people are, who would best represent those topics within those geographic areas. But we'll stop talking here for a minute. Are there thoughts about areas for stakeholder or topics that we're missing here?
If you think of something, place it in the chat box.
Right, there you go. Or can they say it out loud? You can say it out loud or in the chat box. Yeah, whichever one you prefer.
Okay. We'll move on. We'll check the chat box again later.
And feel free, the end of this meeting is not the end of your feedback. And so be thinking on that. If you think of one, if you think of something that we've missed, please email it to Robin and us so that we can incorporate that.
Absolutely. Now, in thinking about preparation for these stakeholder meetings, I mentioned volunteers, and we're going to look to having maybe 3 to 5 volunteer steering committee members to assist us during these sessions, the stakeholders. And that might be, somebody might be helping with signing people in as they come in, maybe name tags, ushering them around the room, showing them different base maps, talking about the process, taking down notes, things like that. We do anticipate there'll be probably 3 to 5 of us as well in the room conducting those meetings. So we will be assisting probably at least 2 in the actual steering committee meeting, and in others as people are wandering around and coming in.
And the reason for that is, right?
And the reason for that is to make sure that you're staying in the process and to help bridge any gap that might be between those stakeholders and the steering committee.
That's right. It's part of that. It's like, guys, it's at the end, as we've always said, is we're here to help facilitate and engage and inform this plan and this process. But at the end of the day, it is your plan. It is your process. And so this is to make sure that you feel and understand that you have ownership. And because, again, at the end of the day, people will come to us for questions, but they're also going to be coming to you for questions. And that is a good thing. You are the leaders of the community.
Okay, getting into the actual individual stakeholder meetings, we'd be looking for room around 20 people or so that could be in there, maybe 30, something similar to what we were in last time for our kickoff meeting that has audio and visual capability. But when we get to the open house, and it may be that we have one of these at the same facility as last time, but the open house would have to be in a larger room, and we're thinking like a large multi-purpose room or gymnasium, at least 200 people capacity. You know, these meetings could generate a lot of interest. We're just not sure at this
I'm hoping they do.
And in some cases, they don't generate a lot of interest, but we do anticipate because your county is under pressure that there will be a larger crowd. So as far as setup, we would have tables and chairs, a reception table, possibly a catering station for snacks and so on. A public feedback station as well, where people who are a little afraid to speak up can actually record their feedback as well. And then we'll also talk about virtual engagement via the Tipton County website. And what we're talking about there is an online survey, providing meeting information on upcoming meetings. We may also post this particular meeting so people can catch up to the process as well. Next slide. And then finally, the topics to be discussed with the individual stakeholder groups. Again, we would do a purpose of the planning process, a brief overview like we did today, talk about the goals, principles, and vision that you established. We will review some base map information. We will begin to talk about what these possible development scenario themes might be. And what we're talking about there is whether or not you want a larger industrial component, maybe aggressive over towards the Mason area, or maybe some growth that is more centered around your municipalities. And in the developing these different themes, we're going to run these by you before we vet these with the stakeholder groups. There will end up being about 4 to 5 of these. One that will be the existing trajectory today with your land use plan and zoning the way it is. And that'll be the basis to compare with the other scenarios. We'll also go through directions for the online survey. And then we ask them about special considerations for each stakeholder group. There may be something that we're not thinking about with each of these 4 groups that they may identify that really will affect land use. Maybe farmers have something in particular, or a large landowner or employer. Maybe there's some information that comes about that's very new about a prospective project that's coming on board. We need to know those things from those groups. So we'll give them an opportunity for comments and questions, and also talk about those next steps.
Could I add one thing, Scott, since I've added one thing way too many times here today? I think, you know, we could almost, we have the bullet points, the individual topics and everything that we would want to cover. We may not need to cover all of them with each stakeholder group, but I think it's really important for us all to remember that in the stakeholder meetings, as with most, if not all of our public engagement, it is about us presenting information and providing information, but that is to facilitate a discussion, because we are here to listen. These are really, we can almost say that these are listening sessions. We're there to listen, we're here to listen to you guys. We're going to be there to listen to each of these individual stakeholders and groups throughout this process.
Thank you, John. Next slide. So we're going to look at the chat box here in a moment, but I want to make sure that you mark down on your calendars the upcoming meetings. The next one, March 7th, and we're anticipating that at 11 a.m. We'll send out more information later on. It will be a Zoom meeting. And then we anticipate the one to follow be an in-person meeting on March 29th. And that is assuming we are going to move forward with the public engagement process in April. There may be some training involved at that particular meeting.
Mm-hmm. It'll be fun. It's going to be fun.
It will be. We'll give you more information at your next meeting. So let's open the chat box. My contact information is there. You can also email Robin. She can get that to me if you do not have my email. Wait, is there anything on the chat box? I want to thank everyone for their participation today. This was great. Yeah, and it's been short and sweet, I know, so far. And I just want to make sure that everybody feels like you've had a chance, you know, if y'all have any questions, I mean, this is a good time. It doesn't have to be even about stuff we've talked about today. Scott runs a much tighter meeting than I do. He's a lot better at this. So, you know, you're welcome for getting Scott involved to make sure he's doing this. We'd still be talking about an opening slide if it was me. So now's a good time for open questions and comments, anything. Anyone?
Well, if you're a little shy about speaking in public, in front of the rest of the group, that's fine. We want to be good stewards of your time because we know we are asking a lot of you guys and we'll be asking more in the weeks and months ahead. So, I don't want to keep everybody on longer than we need to, but we really appreciate being able to get out the vision, the goals and the principles today and getting your approval on that. We know that was a lot. Yeah, that's a great question. That's a great question. Homework, Scott.
Homework, so you saw those stakeholder groups. If you have other suggestions, please let us know. We talked about some of the things that may be discussed during those meetings. If you think of something else, please let us know. We'll send out a copy of this in PDF format so that you're able to see this and look at it again. Along with those base maps, look at your base maps. If you see a facility, maybe it's a new facility that you're planning for. And we can put those on those maps as well.
Into the stakeholder thing, you know, that will be something that we will be looking for you guys to inform us regarding, or like Scott mentioned, are the members, are the folks that would be best, are the best to fill those stakeholder groups, are going to be the most engaged, and are either leaders in the community, know a lot about it, or have a particular interest or stake in the stakeholder within the community. Be thinking about those individuals. And then we will be coordinating that with Debbie, with Robin, sorry, Debbie. We'll be coordinating, sorry, I didn't mean to volunteer you there, Debbie. Unless you want to, we'll be coordinating that with Robin to get that list out, because that will be something, once we have those dates locked down, we want to make sure those stakeholders can actually be there at the dates we need them to be there.
So we'll be working with Sean too, to try to set up that website so we can get the next meeting date on there, maybe an agenda as well before the next meeting. It may be that we have to wait till the fourth meeting to get all that set up, but we will work with him to try to get that set up during the next month or so.
Please, we got a yes, please send suggestions to Robin. There we go.
Anyone else? Well, we really appreciate your feedback today. This was great.
Yeah, this was great, guys. This definitely keeps us moving. Now that we have these, this helps inform essentially everything else we will do in this process and the plan beyond. So thank you guys again. This is big.